I was 19 when I started working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store in suburban Michigan. The job was supposed to be temporary, just something to pay for community college while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. The store was part of a regional chain, big enough to stay open all night but small enough that the overnight crew was just 4 people. Me, another stalker named James, a cashier named Vanessa, and a manager named Rick who mostly disappeared into his office after the evening rush ended. The building itself was old, built in the 70s and renovated badly multiple times. Uneven floors, flickering lights. That persistent smell of old refrigeration units and floor cleaner. It wasn't a pleasant place to work, but the shifts were quiet and the time passed quickly if you didn't think too much. The job had a peculiar rule that nobody explained during my training. Every night at exactly 3:30 in the morning, all the stalkers had to stop what they were doing and move to the front of the store. We'd stay there with Vanessa at the registers for 15 minutes. Not working, not stalking, just standing around, visible from the windows, making awkward small talk or checking our phones. Then at 3:45, Rick would come out of his office and tell us we could go back to our assigned sections. When I asked James about it during my first week, he just shrugged and said it was a corporate policy. Loss prevention or something. He didn't question it. I found it strange, but I'd worked enough retail jobs to know that corporate policies rarely made sense to the people actually doing the work, so I went along with it. Every night, 3:30, 15 minutes at the front, then back to work. After about 3 weeks, I started paying attention to what happened during those 15 minutes. The store would be completely empty, no customers, no deliveries, just the 4 of us standing at the front and the rest of the building stretching out behind us in fluorescent silence. I noticed that Rick would always do the same thing during those 15 minutes. He'd stand in his office doorway, which had a clear view down the main center aisle, and just watch. Not looking at us, looking past us. Down that long aisle toward the back of the store, his face had this tense expression, like he was waiting for something. One night I asked him directly what the policy was about. Why did we have to stop working at that specific time? He said it was for safety, that's all. Just safety. When I pushed for more details, he told me not to worry about it and to just follow the procedure. Around my second month there, James quit suddenly. Just called in one morning and said he wasn't coming back. Rick seemed more annoyed than surprised. He worked my shift alone for a few nights until they hired a replacement, a guy in his 30s named Carl. Carl had worked overnight retail before at different chains. He knew the routine. But when 3:30 came on his first night and I told him we needed to go to the front, he looked confused. He asked why. I explained it was policy. He laughed and said he'd never heard of anything like that. He said it sounded like bullshit. I told him he should probably just go along with it. He refused, said he had work to finish and wasn't going to waste 15 minutes standing around for no reason. I went to the front alone. Rick noticed Carl wasn't there. He went back to find him. I heard them arguing from where I stood at the registers. Carl insisted the rule was stupid. Rick said it wasn't optional. Eventually, Carl came to the front, but he was pissed off about it. He stood next to me, checking his phone aggressively, making comments about corporate nonsense. When the 15 minutes ended and Rick dismissed us, Carl immediately went back to his section. I worked in the next aisle over. Around 4 in the morning, I heard Carl yell, not a scream, just a loud, startled yell followed by the sound of boxes hitting the floor. I ran over to his aisle. He was standing there, white-faced, staring at the far end. I asked what happened. He said someone had been standing there, at the end of the aisle, just standing there, watching him. I looked. The aisle was empty. He insisted he'd seen someone, a figure, tall, dark, standing perfectly still, and then it was gone. Carl didn't come back after that shift. He sent Rick a text saying he quit. That made 2 stalkers in 2 months. Rick hired another replacement, but that person quit after 1 week. No explanation. Then another, quit after 3 days. I was the only stalker who'd lasted more than a month. Rick started working the floor with me himself during those shifts, helping stalk so the work would get done. I asked him one night why people kept quitting. He said some people weren't cut out for overnight work. It messes with your head, makes you see things that aren't there. I asked him if he'd ever seen anything. He stopped working and looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "That's why we have the 3:30 rule. Follow it and you'll be fine. Don't ask questions. Don't investigate. Just do your job and stay at the front during those 15 minutes." I wish I'd listened. I wish I'd just kept following the rule and never pushed further. But I was 19 and curious and stupid. One night, about 3 months into the job, I decided to test it. When 3:30 came, I told Rick I wasn't feeling well and needed to use the bathroom. He looked at me like I'd just suggested something insane. He said it could wait 15 minutes. I insisted. He reluctantly agreed but told me to make it quick. I went to the bathroom in the back of the store, but I didn't use it. I hid in one of the aisles instead, the aisle where Carl had seen something. I wanted to know what everyone was so afraid of. I crouched behind a display and waited. The store was silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigeration units, the buzz of fluorescent lights. Nothing else. Then at exactly 3:32, I heard it. Footsteps, heavy footsteps, coming from the very back of the store, from the warehouse area where we kept overstock, moving slowly through the aisles, getting closer. I stayed crouched, barely breathing, watching through a gap in the display. The footsteps continued, methodical, unhurried. They reached my aisle. I saw it then, a shape, tall, dark, indistinct, like it was made of shadow. It moved down the aisle, not walking so much as gliding. It stopped halfway down, right where I was hiding. I pressed myself against the shelf, trying to make myself smaller. It stood there. I could feel it looking at me, even though it had no visible eyes, no face, just that dark shape. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably less than a minute. Then I heard Rick calling my name from the front. His voice was urgent. I almost panicked. The shape turned and moved back the way it came. Silent, quick, gone. I came out of hiding and ran to the front. Rick grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the registers. He didn't say anything, just kept glancing back toward the aisles. At 3:45, he finally released his grip. His hands were shaking. He told me to never, ever do that again. I asked him what it was. He said he didn't know. He said the store had been built on old land. Before it was a grocery store, it was something else. Before that, something else. The land had history. Things had happened there. People had died there. Maybe that's why. Maybe it was something else. But every night at 3:32, something walked through the store. It had been happening for years, decades maybe. The company knew. That's why the policy existed. As long as everyone stayed at the front, visible from the windows where the lights were brightest and there were witnesses, nothing happened. But anyone in the back during those minutes was alone with it. Most people who saw it quit immediately. Some had worse reactions. One person had a breakdown and was hospitalized. James had seen it. That's why he quit. Rick had seen it once, years ago, during his first week as manager. He'd followed the rule ever since. I quit 2 days later. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't pretend everything was normal. Couldn't stand at those registers every night knowing what was moving through the aisles behind us. Rick understood. He didn't try to convince me to stay. The last thing he said to me was, "Don't ever work overnight retail, anywhere. Some jobs aren't worth the money." I think about that often. I wonder if other stores have their own version of 3:30, their own rules nobody talks about. their own reasons for keeping people away from certain places at certain times. I wonder how many people work those shifts and never question it, never test it, never find out what happens when you break the rules. I hope I never find out what would have happened if Rick hadn't called my name that night. I hope that shape just would have stood there. I hope it will eventually go away. But I don't think that's true. I think I was seconds away from understanding why the rule existed, and I'm grateful I never got that close. The grocery store where I worked the night shift had a policy about the back warehouse area. Only managers and stockers were allowed back there, and even then we were supposed to work in pairs after midnight. Nobody explained why that rule existed when I started. The warehouse manager, an older guy named Tom, just said it was for safety reasons, liability, the usual corporate nonsense. The warehouse was huge, full of tall industrial shelving units holding overstock and pallets of goods waiting to be moved to the floor. Poor lighting, narrow aisles, the kind of space where sounds echoed weird and you could never quite tell where they were coming from. I didn't mind it at first. I actually preferred working back there because it meant less interaction with customers and other staff. My first indication that something was wrong with the warehouse came about 2 months into the job. I was pulling a pallet of canned goods from the far back section using the electric jack to move it toward the door. The overhead lights in that section were motion activated to save energy so they'd turn off if nobody was moving around. I was halfway to the door when the lights behind me shut off. All of them, in sequence. Like something was following me but staying just beyond the motion sensor range. I stopped and looked back. The darkness was complete. Our warehouse didn't have windows. Without the overhead lights, you couldn't see anything. I stood there for maybe 15 seconds listening. I heard something shift, a scraping sound, metal on concrete, then nothing. The lights stayed off. I finished moving the pallet out quickly and closed the warehouse door behind me. I mentioned it to Tom the next night. He got this look on his face like he'd been expecting me to bring it up eventually. He told me that the motion sensors were old and buggy. Sometimes they'd shut off even when people were still moving. He said maintenance had been promising to fix them for years. Then he reminded me about the buddy system rule, said it was important to follow it, especially in the back sections. I asked him why. He just said it was safer that way and changed the subject. I noticed after that conversation that Tom never went into the warehouse alone, even during the day shift when the rule technically didn't apply. He'd always wait for someone else to go with him, and he never went past the third row of shelving, always sent younger employees to get things from the back sections. The lights following me thing happened 3 more times over the next month. Always in the deep back sections. Always the same pattern. I'd be moving through the aisles and the lights behind me would shut off in sequence, like something was pacing me but maintaining a specific distance. I started testing it. I'd stop suddenly and wait. The lights would stay on for exactly 30 seconds after I stopped moving, then click off. Standard motion sensor timing, but the sequence was too perfect, too deliberate. Like whatever was triggering the lights was timing its movements to match the sensors. I tried convincing myself it was just a coincidence. Air currents moving boxes, the building is settling, anything logical. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was back there. Something that had learned the rhythm of the lights. One night I had to retrieve a pallet from the absolute back corner of the warehouse. We called it the dead zone because it was the furthest from the door and barely used. Old discontinued products got stored there. Damaged goods waiting for claims processing. Stuff that had been sitting for months or years. I took a flashlight with me because I knew the lights back there were especially unreliable. The motion sensors were supposed to trigger as I walked, illuminating my path, but I wanted a backup. I made it to the pallet I needed, which was sitting under a burned-out light fixture. As I was hooking up the electric jack, I heard breathing. Not my own. This was heavier, raspy, coming from somewhere above me. I looked up. The shelving units in that section were 20 feet tall. The top shelves were dark. My flashlight beam didn't reach that far. The breathing continued, steady, rhythmic. I stood perfectly still, listening, trying to pinpoint the location. It seemed to be moving, shifting from one side of the shelving unit to the other. I called out and asked if anyone was there. My voice sounded small in that huge space, no response, just the breathing. I decided to leave. I unhooked the jack and started walking back toward the door. The lights behind me went out immediately, all of them, faster than the standard 30-second delay. I was plunged into complete darkness except for my flashlight beam. I started walking faster, then running. The breathing sound followed me, keeping pace, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. The motion sensor lights weren't turning on, none of them, like the building itself had shut down. I used my flashlight to navigate, running full speed through the aisles. I hit the door hard enough to hurt my shoulder and burst through into the main store area. Tom was standing right outside the warehouse door, like he'd been waiting there. He looked at my face and nodded slowly, like he understood everything without me saying a word. He told me to go home early, clock out, take the next 2 days off. I asked him what was in the warehouse, what was really in there. He said he didn't know. He'd worked there for 18 years and nobody knew. But everyone who worked the night shift eventually had an encounter. Some people quit immediately afterward. Others, like him, just learned to stay away from certain areas. He said the company knew about it. Corporate had sent people to investigate years ago. They didn't find anything. No animals, no intruders, no carbon monoxide, no explanation. So they just implemented the buddy system and stopped talking about it. I asked him why he didn't just quit. He said the pay was good and his wife had medical bills. You learn to live with certain things when you need the money. I worked there for 6 more months. I never went into the deep back sections of the warehouse again. I always found excuses to send someone else or to pull from the front stock. The breathing incident never repeated itself, but sometimes when I was working near the warehouse door, I'd hear sounds from inside. Scraping, movement. The lights turn on and off in sequence. I left that job for something else eventually. Better hours, better location. Before I quit, Tom pulled me aside and thanked me for lasting as long as I did. He said most people don't make it past 3 months. He gave me his phone number and told me to call him if I ever wanted to talk about it. I never called, but I kept the number. Sometimes late at night I think about that warehouse, about what could learn patterns, what could breathe but not answer, what could exist in a public building for nearly 2 decades without anyone being able to prove it was there. I wonder if it's still there. I wonder if it's always been there. I wonder how many buildings have their own version of it. I worked night shift stocking at a 24-hour grocery store for 3 years before I quit last month. What happened during my final week is why I'll never work overnight retail again. The store was one of those massive locations on the edge of town, the kind that stays empty between midnight and 5 in the morning except for the occasional insomniac or drunk college kid. Management kept us understaffed on purpose since there was barely any traffic. Most nights it was just me, one cashier, and a manager who spent most of his time in the back office watching security monitors. The building felt different after midnight. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. The air conditioning created these pockets of cold that moved around like something breathing. It started on a Tuesday around 2 in the morning. I was stocking cereal in aisle 7 when I heard a shopping cart rolling in the next aisle over. The sound was distinct, that rhythmic squeaking of a bad wheel combined with the rattle of the metal basket. I figured it was a customer even though I hadn't seen anyone come in. I kept working, pulling boxes from my pallet and arranging them on the shelf. The cart sound continued, moving slowly down aisle 8, then stopping. I heard it start again after a minute, rolling back the way it came. Something about the pattern felt wrong, too slow, too deliberate. I walked to the end of my aisle and looked down aisle 8. It was empty. No cart, no person, just endless rows of canned vegetables disappearing toward the far wall. I went back to stocking, but the sound returned 20 minutes later. Same aisle, same slow rolling pattern. This time I immediately walked over to check. Again, nothing. I even went to the front of the store to ask Marcus, the cashier, if he'd seen anyone. He looked up from his phone and shook his head. Said he'd been watching the doors and nobody had come in for over an hour. I told him about the cart sounds. He gave me this uncomfortable look and said I should probably just focus on my work. The way he said it made me think he'd heard something similar before. I didn't push it. I went back to aisle 7 and tried to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. The next night it happened again, but this time in multiple aisles. I'd hear the cart in aisle 3 while I was working in aisle 1. Then it would move to aisle 5, then back to 3. Always when I wasn't looking, always just out of sight. I started timing my movements, trying to catch it by running to the next aisle as soon as I heard the sound. I never saw anything. On Thursday night, I was stocking soup cans in aisle 4 when I heard it right behind me. Close enough that I could hear the individual items shifting in the basket. I spun around fast enough that I almost knocked over my pallet. The aisle was empty, but hanging in the air was this smell like old meat and chemical cleaner mixed together. It made my eyes water. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, barely breathing, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. Friday night, the manager pulled me into his office before my shift started. He looked tired, older than usual. He told me that the corporation had been reviewing security footage and noticed I'd been abandoning my workstations frequently. Wandering around, looking agitated, he asked if everything was okay at home. I tried to explain about the cart sounds, but he cut me off. He said the security cameras had audio capability and they'd reviewed the footage. There were no cart sounds on any of the recordings. Just me, standing in empty aisles, staring at nothing. He said if I needed to take some time off for personal reasons, he'd understand. I told him I was fine. I wasn't fine. That night, I brought earbuds and played music while I worked, trying to drown out any sounds. It didn't help. Around 3 in the morning, I was in the freezer section restocking ice cream when my music cut out. My phone was still playing according to the screen, but no sound was coming through. That's when I heard it, the cart, but this time it wasn't in another aisle. It was in the freezer section with me. I could hear it rolling on the tile, getting closer. I pulled out my earbuds and turned around. At the far end of the freezer aisle, maybe 40 feet away, I saw it. A shopping cart. Moving toward me, slowly, steadily. Nobody is pushing it, nobody near it, just rolling forward on its own, that bad wheel squeaking with each rotation. Inside the basket, I could see something dark, shapeless, piled in the bottom. The smell hit me again, stronger this time. I backed up until I hit the freezer door behind me. The cart stopped about 10 feet away. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds. Then I heard a voice. Low, barely a whisper. It said my name, not my first name, my full name. The one on my employee badge. I don't remember leaving the aisle. I don't remember clocking out or driving home. I just remember sitting in my car in my driveway as the sun came up, still shaking. I called in sick for my remaining shifts that week and sent my resignation email on Monday. Marcus texted me a few days later. He said the new Night Stalker quit after 2 shifts. I wouldn't say why. Corporations are having trouble filling the position. The store is still open 24 hours. I drive past it sometimes on my way to my new job. I always look at the windows. Sometimes late at night, I swear I can see a cart moving between the aisles, just rolling back and forth, waiting for someone. Subscribe for more stories like these and comment which one stayed with you the longest.